Hey, sorry, we're out of money to help Americans. We can't do that anymore. Maybe if you go across our border, then illegally cross back in, maybe you'll have a chance to get some cash, a little bit of assistance. Holy cow. Have you been yelling at your TV and/or radio today? It drives me absolutely crazy. We'll talk about that a lot more coming up. Tommy Tuberville, the U.S. Senator, is here at 3:30. Mike Davis from the Article 3 Project at 4 o'clock. Hung Cao, U.S. Senate candidate in Virginia, just did a big debate last night against Tim Kaine. Had some great moments. We'll talk to Captain Cow about that. And Mike Waltz, the congressman from Florida, is working very aggressively right now to help American citizens who have been displaced, killed, and put out by a big hurricane. Meanwhile, where's the Biden administration? You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. It's now been a week since Hurricane Helene ran roughshod over the United States of America. And at this hour, we are looking at somewhere in the vicinity of at least 200 people are now confirmed dead. And the reports continue to be a mysterious number missing. They say hundreds of American citizens are missing. The Atlantic magazine today has a headline with in quotation marks saying the death toll is going to be tremendous, saying that they spoke with a former FEMA director that is reflecting on this, saying that the devastation in western North Carolina in particular is just worse than so many have ever seen. And many of you may know I once lived in North Carolina for some time. I worked in media in North Carolina. I have an old friend who's a newspaper man down there, and I was calling him earlier this week. I was wondering, because he's in touch with all the military bases down there, especially on the coast. And I was saying, hey, what's happening? Are there members of the military on the move? Is the Biden administration using American resources to help American citizens? Is that happening right now? And he was trying to get some answers. He's been making those phone calls. He called, including to Marine Corps Air Station Cherry Point down there. And he finally, hours later, was getting answers back. And the answer was no. Nothing's happening. Nobody's moving. Nobody's being asked to deploy. What? How many natural disasters have you and I seen around the planet where an American military aircraft carrier is repositioned to help foreigners in their moment of distress, in their moment of need? We see it all the time. We have entire commercials that the American military puts out as a part of their effort to recruit people, showing the humanitarian missions that they undertake in other countries to save desperate people. These are federal resources at the disposal of the Biden-Harris administration. And yesterday, upon Joe Biden's trip, finally, many days later, well after Donald Trump had already gone in and brought relief supplies of his own in, he comes in and says, well, I've mobilized 1,000 active duty troops, 1,000 of them. They're sending them in from Fort Bragg, since renamed to Fort Liberty, 1,000 troops. What are they doing to help American citizens? What effort are they undertaking? Kamala Harris announced yesterday in North Carolina, don't you worry, if you've been a victim of this storm, all you have to do is apply and we'll eventually give you $750.
And the federal relief and assistance that we have been providing has included FEMA providing $750 for folks who need immediate needs being met, such as food, baby formula, and the like. And you can apply now for anyone who's watching this who has been affected.
You can apply. You'll get maybe $750 maybe someday. That should cover a couple dozen eggs. That'll be great. Like what? $750. And now we have Alejandro Mayorkas claiming that they don't even have the money to take care of Americans. Sorry, we're out of cash. Mayorkas warns FEMA doesn't have enough funding to last through hurricane season. Mayorkas was not specific, the Associated Press reports, about how much additional money the agency may need, but his remarks on Air Force One underscored concerns voiced by President Joe Biden and some lawmakers earlier this week that Congress may need to pass a supplemental spending bill this fall to help states with recovery efforts. Quote, we are meeting the immediate needs with the money we have. We are expecting another hurricane hitting. FEMA does not have the funds to make it through the season, says Mayorkas. By now, you likely know the Department of Homeland Security, under which FEMA falls, has been spending all of that money on foreign nationals. In fact, Just this year alone, DHS has given away $640 million at least to illegals and the organizations that the Biden administration has dedicated to trafficking them into the country. $640 million. If you're an American citizen, maybe we'll cut you a check for $750. Maybe. If you're still alive and we can reach you. And that's, of course, not the only money that we've given to illegals and in support of illegals. In fact, that number is much, much higher. Earlier this year, Congressman Jody Arrington, he runs the House Budget Committee, he's the chairman there. He was going over the actual estimates in terms of how much money you and I are spending on illegal foreign nationals. And the costs, let's just put it this way, staggering.
FAIR has done a great job. I've seen studies that suggest the cost is upward of $400 billion. Their cost estimate is at $150 billion. The lion's share of that cost is borne by state and local governments. And friends, state and local governments can't borrow or print money like the federal government. And so they're having to balance their budgets by either absorbing this cost through raising taxes, or they're having to cut services to their citizens. The $150 billion, when you look at the 22 million people that are estimated to be in this country illegally, comes out to about $9,000 tax dollars per illegal immigrant. So I want you to listen. I want everybody to listen to this stat. $9,000 roughly per illegal immigrant that taxpayers are fronting.
And that's a conservative estimate. That's the $150 billion estimate, $9,000 per illegal. If you push it up to that $400 billion estimate of what we're spending on illegals, which is probably far more likely to be true, well, now you're getting up towards, what, $20,000 per illegal? But if you're a desperate American in Asheville, North Carolina, you may get $750. That's where we are. Mayorkas has raided FEMA's budget. On Fox News earlier this morning, Ashley Moody, the Attorney General of Florida, was saying it didn't have to be this way.
Mayorkas has come in like a virus and infected these what need to be healthy, strong, fundamental programs to ensure the stability and safety of Americans in times of disaster. So you heard, they have taken the FEMA Emergency Food and Shelter Program and over time siphoned off hundreds of millions of dollars into basically making it an illegal immigrant resettlement program. And so when you see these states and cities around...
Have you had enough of the betrayals? Is there any point at which you say we've had enough? I know probably for almost everybody within the sound of my voice, you reached that point a long time ago. But I'm sitting here with you wondering about the rest of our countrymen. Have you had enough yet? Have you had enough yet? That was what I was hoping J.D. Vance would say a lot this week in his debate, although he did fantastic in that debate. But have you had enough yet? Over on MSNBC today, Andrea Mitchell, who looks really exhausted by how much losing her party has undertaken. She looks exhausted. She doesn't even know how to process it. She had Ian Sams on, a goofy, bald-headed spokesman for the Kamala campaign. He's sitting there on national television, and Andrea Mitchell is listing off all of the horrible things that are all happening simultaneously right now. Well, I shouldn't say all. It's a long list. She can't get to all of it. But at least a lot of the stuff that's been happening in a big way this week. And then she offers Ian Sams the excuse, again, in a very exhausted voice. She's like, this is all out of your control. This is not even in your control. When she says in yours, she's not talking about Ian Sams. She means Kamala's. It's not Kamala's fault, but there's a lot of crap going on, Andrea Mitchell says.
Now, you've got 33 days, and you've got all kinds of things happening around the world, not in your control, but you've got the port strike, you've got the Middle East, and the possibility of a wider war already, Iran making new threats today against anyone who helps Israel, and divisions in the Democratic Party over help for Israel versus concerns for the Palestinians, and now for the Lebanese who are being evacuated from their homes as well. So all of that, as well, as the hurricane and the after effect and criticism in two key states, especially North Carolina, that the FEMA response was too slow. Also in Georgia, states that you've got to win, or really need to try to win.
Listen to how exhausted she sounds. Do you hear that? She can barely get the words out. I love that the hurricane destruction was the last thing in her list. Oh, and that too. And if they're saying on MSNBC, if Andrea, as she did today, if they're saying, and criticism that the FEMA response was too slow, you know that they're understating just how crappy this has been. It's gotten to MSNBC to the point that they're asking questions of Kamala's campaign about this. And once again, as Andrea Mitchell keeps saying, she's like, look, this is completely out of your control.
How do you combat all of this? These are circumstances, some of which were beyond your control.
Well, I think the vice president doesn't see these issues through the political prism. I think she sees them through the leadership prism. And I think that when you think about...
in which she's failed entirely on all of these issues.
These sort of instances and events that occur, and it raises the measure of the leader. And it says, do we want someone who's serious, or do we want someone...
Yeah, you're right. This is a leadership test for Kamala. Thank you, spokesman for Kamala.
...who's unserious? Do we want someone who's going to spend their time trying to put the country first and solve problems and get help to people who need...
Yes, that's what we want. Is this guy a Trump spokesman?
...need it, and to de-escalate conflict around the world?
Yes.
Or do we want someone who's going to play politics, who's going to lie
like
and
Kamala.
make up claims that aid isn't going to Republican areas that Republican governors across the South have to repudiate?
So you're right about the playing politics thing is what we'd like to stop. That's what we'd like to stop. We'd like somebody to focus on American citizens. We'd like for them to de-escalate conflicts. We'd like for them to represent leadership and actually rise to the occasion. That's what we want. That is not what we're getting. This is a test of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and in particular, the woman who would like a promotion from the current job she's in, Vice President of the United States, where she has wreaked tremendous havoc on this country. And we get these measly gestures from them, in addition to the fact that they're trying to stop you from having any sense of just how devastated your fellow countrymen are. Pete Buttigieg, the hapless Department of Transportation Secretary, the trans secretary, Pete Buttigieg, is saying this week that you can't fly a drone in these affected regions. This sounds familiar. Remember the last time we heard this from the Biden-Harris administration? It was on our border, when the border was in all-out collapse and Fox News was trying to fly a drone above it just to capture the images to show American citizens what was happening to their country. It was the Biden-Harris administration that intervened and said, you cannot do this. We're shutting down the airspace. You will not be allowed to exercise your First Amendment right. That was the response. And here it is again.
Our goal is to make sure that funding is no obstacle to very quickly getting people the relief that they need and deserve. There's also some safety issues that come up. For example, temporary flight restrictions to make sure that the airspace is clear for any flights or drone activity that might be involved in helping to allow those emergency responders to do their job.
Yeah, no flights or drone activity permitted by the government. You are being banished from doing that. Now, what might a drone be useful for? A drone might be useful for, I don't know, to disseminate images to the American people, but perhaps more importantly, as a part of search and rescue operations to try and find people who are still alive in a region of the country where medicine is right now, in some cases, being delivered by donkey. That's happening right now. Pete Buttigieg doesn't want you to see that, so they want to shut down the drones. Also, we have reports that helicopter rescues are being shut down, that civilians who have access to helicopters, the money and the resources, are trying to do that, and civilians are being threatened with arrest for attempting to conduct those rescue operations. What is this country we would live in? What could be more American than someone who has the means and the capability to rescue their fellow citizen and doing that? And the administration is opposed to this. They want to stop it in its tracks. So they're hampering actual rescue efforts, and then they're failing to send the necessary resources. And they're kind of giving us the we'll get to it when we get to it routine. They're not mobilizing, not moving heaven and earth. We're not Ukraine, so we're not at the top of the list. They're not sending hundreds of billions of dollars their way. They're saying if we're going to help Americans, we're going to need more money from Congress or something. We don't really have money for this. They spend it all on foreign nationals that they're bringing into the country. How many betrayals do you think it's going to take? How many? Before everyone you know and everyone in this country who casts a vote wakes up to the fact that they're screwing us. That they're screwing us. It's actually worse than prostitution, isn't it? Because they take your money and then they screw you. Yeah, that helicopter pilot, at least one, a South Carolina pilot who's been flying stranded Hurricane Helene victims to safety by the name of Jordan Seidholm. He was flying victims out of the devastation over the weekend, the New York Post reported, when local leaders told him there was a flight restriction on the area, that they would have to arrest him if he continued making flights. That's right. Arrest for the decent person. Meanwhile, 13,000 convicted murderers are in our country, illegal immigrants. But the good American who's rescuing his fellow man is threatened with arrest. How upside down are we? Michael's calling in from Baltimore now on line 2. Hello, Michael. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hi, Vince. How you doing? Thanks for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
I was just thinking, I haven't heard anybody today make the correlation. Anytime the left talks about the border or anything about the border, there is no crisis. The situation is under control. It's not an emergency, while simultaneously spending hundreds of $millions from the Federal Emergency Management Association. Wouldn't that, by definition, make the border a crisis?
Yeah, it does kind of suggest that they think it's an emergency, or at least they're rating our emergency funding for their own priorities, Michael. You're right about that. It's a good observation. Thanks, Michael. Yeah, Michael calling from Baltimore, part of the great WMAL audience, always making smart observations on what's happening. Coming up, I'm going to talk more about this border crisis, what's up with FEMA, American citizens. Senator Tommy Tuberville, Coach Tuberville, joins me just moments away. Don't miss that. And we have got to talk about Loudoun County. I'll be in Loudoun County tomorrow morning for early voting. More information on that ahead. Welcome back to the Vince Coglianese Show. Do you remember this moment from just 2 nights ago?
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own leadership.
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
And then they cut off his microphone. What an amazing moment. Of course, J.D. Vance was right about this. For more proof of that, let's bring in someone else who knows the truth. That's the Alabama Senator, Tommy Tuberville, joins us. Coach Tuberville, great to have you on the show, sir.
Yeah, how are you? That was an interesting time. You know, JD's as smart as both those young ladies put together, and I don't know what they call journalism, but that obviously wasn't journalism. It was trying to hide the truth.
Yeah, it was.
They've been hiding it for 3.5 years, Vince.
It was a remarkable moment because, as J.D. Vance pointed out, the CBS had declared ahead of time there would be nothing like this going on during the debate. They wouldn't be interjecting with quips or facts or opinions or anything, and yet there they were trying to do that to J.D. Vance. But as we look at the actual facts, Senator, how do you assess what is going on with all of these people who are coming in via an app into the United States, invited by the Biden administration?
Well, this has been happening ongoing. They've been trying to find more and more ways to get people into the country as quick as possible because they know there's probably a good chance that they're going to get run out of office. Every time I travel in the South or out of the country, coming back into the country, and just an example, a few weeks ago, I came back from Bogota, Colombia, down there going through some manufacturing that they're thinking about moving to our country. Half the plane coming back was illegals from South America, and you can tell they've got identification around their neck. They got their yellow manila envelope. They all have the same thing coming in, and it's just a shame. And they're taking them to red states all across the South, trying to turn these red states into blue states, and they're giving them asylum. They're giving them anything they possibly want. They just want to overrun our country as quick as possible, and hopefully they can get them into the voting booth to vote this year. And it's just it's a crime what they're doing to the American citizens and our country.
It's a massive number of people dropped onto individual towns. When you look at a town like Springfield, Ohio, tens of thousands of foreigners just dropped onto the town. You're seeing this in Alabama too, sir?
Oh, we're getting overrun. We have 3 or 4 counties that we get calls every day. There's another busload come in here, another busload there. They're walking around in the streets. And what's amazing, if you're going to do this, as the Democrats are, have a plan for what they're going to do and how they're going to survive, where they're going to live, how they're going to eat. They just throwing them out there, just hoping that some of them stick into the environment. And it's just they're doing as much harm to the people coming from. Most of these are Haitians from Haiti. And they're hoping they can find a job and don't ever have to leave. But they're sending them here on a parole, as J.D. Vance. It's a law that was passed years ago that basically said, you can come here for a few months legally if you need some kind of medical procedure or something you can't get in your own country, and then you have to leave. Well, they're basically breaking the law and doing this just for people to come here to get a job, vote during this election, and then they'll have to go home sooner or later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and my understanding, even the federal government's own assessment of this has found that this program is full of fraud, that there's a lot of illegitimate claims being made, a lot of fake claims about who their sponsor is coming into the country. So just top to bottom, this looks like a disaster. And I wonder, Coach Tuberville, as we look at the role of American companies perhaps in some of this, because you have people being hired, that foreign workers who are being hired at the expense of American workers. It seems like there are a couple components here of different power centers who are responsible for keeping the chaos going.
Oh yeah. And again, this is an area that if you see it every quarter, they send out the job reports. Oh yeah, there's 800,000 people been hired. Well, most of these people are illegals that are working for part-time pay, being taken advantage of. And again, as you said, our whole federal government is fraud right now. There's not one agency, especially the DHS with Mayorkas running it. They have the CBP app where now these illegals all over the country can fill out this app and get on an airplane being paid for by the American taxpayers to come to our country. And it's they're looking for every way that they can destroy the constitutional republic that we live in. And they don't care about the American taxpayer. And just look what's happened in North Carolina. FEMA has been spending money on all these illegals, and now we've had this huge disaster up and down the East Coast, and they're almost broke. They need more money. They're thinking about calling us back in to do a supplemental to feed this beast called FEMA that sometimes it does a good job, but most of the time these federal entities, these bureaucrats take advantage and they spend money from other places in other departments to take care of their own needs. It is a disaster for our country and the American taxpayer who can't afford it.
So this is a total, what you're describing is a total betrayal of American 100%. Citizens. And you're right. The Associated Press was reporting today that FEMA now says they can meet some of their immediate needs, but they don't have enough funding to make it through hurricane season, according to Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. This is the same agency that has spent a tremendous amount of American taxpayer dollars on all of these illegal foreign nationals coming into our country. And it's also the same organization that says that equity is their number one priority. I don't even know what's going on. This is supposed to be the agency that responds to emergencies for Americans.
Yeah, all the money that's sent up here to Washington, D.C. from the American taxpayers is basically used in some type of slush fund, one way or another, to fund anything that can be helped to overrun the American dream. And I've never seen anything like it. I've been up here almost 4 years now, and there's very little done for the American people. You know, the Democrats passed this $1.2 trillion, along with some Republicans, infrastructure bill, 3 years ago. Where is that money? It's not going to the states. A lot of it is going to climate change overseas to take care of these European countries that can't take care of themselves, by the way, that have been overrun, let themselves be overrun by immigration. We pay for all their security through NATO, but we are flushing money right and left, and a lot of it obviously stolen, fraud, things like that. But the American taxpayers deserves much, much more than what they're getting. And again, there's nobody that looks out for them. There's nobody that looks, and from the federal government side, there's no oversight. There's nothing that's looked at in terms of protecting the American citizen. $300 billion was sent into our treasury for the American taxpayer in July. $300 billion. We spent $545 billion. $245 billion more than American taxpayers sent in. It is atrocious what they're doing to our country.
Yeah, that math doesn't work. Coach Tuberville, you've been in the United States Senate since 2021, so you've seen the entirety of the Biden-Harris disaster. And you talk about the spending that's going on by the government, by the Biden-Harris administration. I think people don't appreciate the role that Kamala Harris has played in all of this because, a lot of vice presidents really are in many ways just sort of ceremonial mascots for administrations, don't do a tremendous amount. But the reality is in the United States Senate, that Kamala Harris has cast more tie-breaking votes than any vice president in American history. And many of those votes were for the very spending bills that you're talking about, sort of the out-of-control inflation that we're looking at. That's on her. What did you see right there in the Senate?
Well, you're exactly right. And the Senate was pretty much even. And to get anything done like that, there had to be a tiebreaker vote. Well, who is that? That's the Vice President of the United States. 50, 60 times she's been called over to the Senate to break a tie, knowing that I guarantee you she didn't most of the time didn't know what she was voting on, unless it was one of these huge giveaways, which was the CARES Act of almost $2 trillion, which never should have been done. She was one of the votes for that. The infrastructure bill, she did not have to break the tie because we had some of these rhinos from the Republican side vote for that. But she has come over and she's confirmed bad judges across this country. And she was actually, as you said, usually they go to weddings and funerals, these vice presidential electees. But she was actually given one of the biggest jobs ever for a vice presidential standpoint, and that was the border czar. And my God, she finally went down there. She's been down a couple of times, never spent any time, really doesn't know what's going on. They tell her to just shut up and do what we tell you to do, and she's done exactly that. Mm-hmm. And now they're thinking about, some of these people are thinking about voting for vice president, president of the United States. My God, folks, you have lost your mind if you vote for this person.
And I love how they've now spent all this time trying to run away from the title border czar. Oh, she's not the border czar. She's not the border czar, which really tells you a lot because, as you know, Coach Tuberville, politicians will take credit for things they had nothing to do with any chance they can get. But the second that you say, well, she's the border czar, there's a reason she's running away from that title. It's because it's a disaster.
It's exactly right. She is. She's trying to make herself look good in the eyes of all these American voters now. And again, as I said, she can't talk policy. She doesn't know policy. She's uneducated on it, and she's been in the Senate. And I guarantee you, just listening to some of the Democrats on the Democrat side, most of them don't like her.
Right.
She didn't do anything, and it's probably a shame if you look at it of some of the people on the Democratic side that they just overrun. I talked to several of them. They were going to throw their name in a hat after Biden pulled out, and they were going to go to the convention and try to get the nomination. They were all called and said, "You will not put your name in," pretty much threatened. And they said, "Hey, this basically this was done after the first election. She was going to be the next presidential candidate from the Democratic side after Biden, if people finally figured out he couldn't spell cat." So it's all This is all a scheme by the deep state to try to get Kamala Harris, and she will not make a decision. If she were to get in, heaven help us if she does, she won't make a decision the whole time she's there. She's a puppet. We all know that.
Senator Tuberville, can you give me your assessment of J.D. Vance, your colleague in the United States Senate? President Trump tapped him as his running mate. We saw him perform really well on that debate stage this week against Tim Walz. I know that there were some people who didn't want J.D. Vance, some Republicans who wanted somebody else to be in that role. What do you think of him?
Well, number one, I really like J.D. I spent a lot of time with him the last couple of years. I told President Trump, he's not deep state. You can trust this guy, but he's really, really smart. I was asked several times about the debate coming up. I said, this is going to be a no contest. I mean, this guy can speak on his feet. He's very smart. He understands policy. I really liked it the other night that this debate, they wouldn't let President Trump talk policy against Biden or Harris because they don't know any, and they just kept interrupting him and fact-checking him. Well, J.D. Vance, other than that one time, he was able to sit there and talk policy, and even Tim Walz, the vice presidential candidate for the Democrats, I think if you'd have given him a little bit more time, Tim Walz would have voted for President Trump and Vance. I mean, he had him convinced. I mean, he was selling the whole country on what's going on, but these two dinglings up there trying to control the narrative tried to interrupt. But I tell you, J.D. is smart. He's going to be a great vice president and probably have a chance to be future president because he really understands the country. And I just been amazed at him. And I reckon President Trump, as a lot of people did, and I thought it was a great choice.
All right. That's Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama. Sir, thank you very much for your time, as always. Okay, let's take a phone call. I've got Larry calling in from Kensington now, line 3. Hello, Larry. You're on the Vince Colonnese Show.
Hello, Vince. Thanks for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to put out the Reagan method of handling things. Back when the air traffic controllers went on strike, Reagan gave them a chance to come back in and do their job, and they wouldn't do it. And he took the military, put them in the air traffic controller seats, and everything ran fairly smooth after that. And I'm thinking that these military dock workers, CDs or CDs or whatever, have a whole lot more complicated items to move from point A to point B. So moving a bunch of crates around might be a vacation for them.
Yeah, it could be. You know, I'm interested to see what options he has. Other than, well, for one, Biden can invoke Taft-Hartley and force everybody back to work for at least an 80-day period. The difference, of course, with the FAA is that those are federal workers in the case of the air traffic controllers. Here you've got all of these dock workers who are not federal employees. But, you know, one thing that's developing today is that Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida has announced that he is sending the National Guard to the affected ports. In fact, I want people to hear this, Larry. Here's Ron DeSantis today saying that he wants his guys to step up.
At my direction, the Florida National Guard and Florida State Guard will be deployed to critical ports affected to maintain order and, if possible, resume operations which would otherwise be shut down during this interruption. Florida Department of Transportation is coordinating calls with seaport rail and trucking partners to ensure that all are prepared and positioned appropriately to limit disruptions to the supply chain and other areas should this continue. I'm also directing Florida Department of Transportation to temporarily waive the collection of tolls and other fees for commercial vehicles using public highways in Florida and waiving the size and weight restrictions normally governing vehicle transportation for the duration of this emergency.
So that latter point, getting rid of all of those fees, is going to help lower the cost of some of these goods that are transported by truck. I'm interested to see what happens here, Larry, as Ron DeSantis says he's sending in the National Guard to see if they can't resume operations at the port entirely. That'd be pretty amazing if he can actually achieve that.
Yeah, but I wouldn't hold your breath on the fees being the fact that the fees are gone, that it will affect anything. It's just the same thing when gas would take a big jump in price.
Yeah.
The gas that was in the ground only cost them, we'll say, 85 cents, yet they still sold it for $2.
Right. Yeah,
So
that's the rocket. That's that rocket feather situation that Gas prices start going up really quickly when the price of a barrel of oil goes up even a little bit, but they come down much more slowly when those oil prices come down by the barrel. Yeah, that's amazing. That's a phenomenon. It happens all the time. Larry, thank you. Yeah, we've got to figure out our way around this. This guy Daggett, who runs the Longshoremen's Association, the cartoon character who says that we're going to cripple the whole economy. We're done. Nobody knows what we do. Now you know what we do. We're going to cripple you. I don't know about you, but you see that guy and you're like, I hate you. Like your first reaction to that is like, I hate you because all you're doing is disrupting the entire economy. You make $1 million a year. You get your Cartier sunglasses on and you're telling everybody you're like a normal dude. Please spare us. But can you imagine if that guy was actually like representing the rest of us? Like it was a union of American citizens he was representing. Really? You want to give all this stuff to illegals? You want people to die in Western North Carolina? You're going to use our money this way? How about no? How about I break your legs if you continue to do this? Huh? You want us to cripple you? The American people will cripple you. I would be for that. I would love Daggett then. I'm Team Daggett. I'd buy him a pair of sunglasses. We'd all pitch in. His sons are making over $600,000 a year in the family business, which is being union bosses. And I'm fine with unions. I'm fine with collective bargaining and stuff, just people banding together, trying to get a fair deal. But this guy is a ridiculous cartoon character, and he's disrupting the whole American economy. Joe Biden is a coward. Biden's a coward. Every time something tough happens for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, what do? They fold like origami. They're just like, no, we're not. You just do whatever you want. We're not going to get involved. They don't fire anybody. Ever. Nobody's ever held accountable. People dying in Afghanistan. The border is collapsing. The dock workers go on strike. The economy is disrupted. He doesn't want to upset the unions. By the way, you see the firefighters union today, the International Association of Firefighters? J.D. Vance spoke at their thing a couple months ago. Kamala Harris was making fun of him for that. For the first time in a long time, they're not endorsing anybody. They just came out today. They're not endorsing the Democrats. They always do. They're not doing it this year. The last time they skipped one of those endorsements, Hillary Clinton in 2016. What happened in that election?